The day they moved into the neighborhood, everything seemed perfect. The streets were quiet, lined with trees that swayed gently in the wind. The houses were clean, the lawns neat, and the air had that calm feeling of a place where people cared about their homes. For years, the homeowner had dreamed of a place like this, a peaceful spot where they could finally put down roots. The first few weeks were full of small joys. They would walk around the block, nodding to neighbors, tending their gardens, or walking their dogs. It felt like a storybook neighborhood, the kind you see in magazines at first. Everything seemed welcoming. The neighbors smiled, and the children played on the lawns. But soon, subtle signs of control started to appear. Small notes left in mailboxes, subtle comments about paint colors, or the way a driveway was kept. It all seemed minor at first, harmless even. But the homeowner had a feeling there was more than what met the eye. The neighborhood was controlled by a homeowners association, commonly called an HOA, but they had no idea how strict it would be. They thought, at first, that rules were normal, something every community had to keep order. But they were about to find out just how far rules could go. The first letter arrived quietly in the mail, thin and official-looking. It complained about a small garden decoration the homeowner had put in the front yard, a little statue that they thought was charming. According to the letter, it violated some rule that said nothing could be placed on the lawn without prior approval. The homeowner reread the letter, disbelief written all over their face. It was just a small statue, and yet the HOA seemed to treat it like a crime. They felt frustrated but brushed it off, thinking it was a simple misunderstanding. They called the HOA office and asked politely about the rule, but the response was rigid and unhelpful. It became clear that the HOA expected strict compliance. No questions asked. The homeowner tried to follow other minor rules, painting the trim the approved color and trimming the bushes to the exact height required. But no matter how carefully they tried to follow the rules, new complaints would arrive. Sometimes it was about the mailbox, other times about the style of their fence. The homeowner began to notice that the HOA's letters were not just suggestions, they were warnings, and warnings meant fines. The rules felt overwhelming. But the homeowner was proud of their property and wanted it to reflect their personality, even if it meant bending a little. They tried to talk to neighbors about it, but most seemed too scared to go against the HOA. One day, the homeowner decided to build a small shed in the backyard. It was practical, nothing extravagant, just enough to store tools and bicycles. They had checked the HOA rules and thought it would be allowed. But as soon as they started planning, the HOA sent another letter. This one was sharper in tone, stating that no new structures could be built without approval, and approval would not be given for the style they proposed. It was a shock, a moment that made the homeowner realize the HOA would not allow anything outside their narrow vision. Friends and family listened in disbelief as the homeowner explained the letter. They were told repeatedly that compliance was easier than fighting back. But the homeowner felt this was about principle. It wasn't just about a shed. It was about having the right to decide what they could do on their own property. The confrontation with the HOA escalated slowly but surely. They wrote back, explaining the practical need for the shed, the safety it would provide for storing heavy tools, and the fact that it would not block views or annoy neighbors. The HOA replied with another refusal, cold and final. The homeowner felt the walls closing in. They realized that the HOA didn't see people as individuals with needs and desires. To the HOA, homeowners were numbers, files, and rules to enforce. The homeowner began researching laws about property rights, reading through city codes, and learning about limits on HOA power. They discovered that in many cases, HOAs could not legally prevent basic improvements on a property, especially if it did not affect the safety or value of neighboring homes. This gave them hope, but also made them more aware of the challenge ahead. The community started to notice the tension. Neighbors would glance at the homeowner's house differently, some in curiosity, others in disapproval. The homeowner felt the isolation that often comes with standing up against a group that wants conformity. Children playing nearby would ask why there were so many letters. And the homeowner would try to explain in simple terms that rules sometimes needed to be challenged when they were unfair. They were careful not to antagonize anyone unnecessarily. But they also refused to let fear dictate their choices. Weeks turned into months. and the homeowner's determination only grew stronger. Every interaction with the HOA became a test of patience and knowledge. They kept meticulous records of letters, emails, and phone calls. They documented every complaint and response, creating a detailed log that would later prove essential. The homeowner realized that standing up wasn't just about the shed. It was about protecting the right to make decisions for themselves and their property. Friends would visit and offer advice, some urging compromise, and others offering moral support. The homeowner learned to balance caution with courage. They did not want to create enemies, but they also refused to be intimidated. They started attending HOA meetings, listening to rules being read aloud, watching the board members' reactions, and noting inconsistencies in enforcement. The homeowner saw that the rules were often applied unevenly, sometimes enforced strictly, other times ignored entirely depending on who owned the house. This observation strengthened their case in their own mind. If rules could be bent or broken for others, they should not have to sacrifice their rights either. Every morning, the homeowner would walk around their property, looking at the lawn, the garden, and the small areas they wanted to improve. They imagined a life where they could make small changes freely, a life without constant threats of fines or reprimands. They began to see their fight not as a personal battle against the HOA alone, but as part of a larger struggle for homeowners' rights everywhere. The thought gave them energy even when exhaustion from letters, phone calls, and anxiety threatened to overwhelm them. Small victories kept the homeowner going. They managed to negotiate minor concessions, like keeping certain garden decorations, though the shed remained a sticking point. Each time they managed to assert their rights, their confidence grew. It was not an easy path. Tension with the HOA continued, and the homeowner learned quickly that perseverance required both patience and strategy. They were no longer just a new resident. They had become a participant in a quiet, ongoing struggle between individuals and an organization that often valued control over fairness. As the months passed, the homeowner began to notice something important. The fight was changing them. They were more careful, more observant, and more aware of the laws that govern property ownership. They spoke differently to neighbors and the HOA, presenting facts calmly rather than letting emotions dictate their responses. They realized that courage was not just about standing up, but about knowing when and how to do it effectively. They were learning to combine knowledge with resolve, and that combination became their greatest strength by the end of the first year. The homeowner had firmly established themselves as someone who would not be easily intimidated. They had learned the limits of HOA power, the protections afforded by law, and the importance of community support. The first part of their journey was about awakening, about realizing that living in a dream neighborhood sometimes required fighting to protect that dream. It was about understanding that rules, when applied unfairly, could become tools of oppression, and that standing up was not just a right, but a responsibility. And so, the homeowner continued their life in the neighborhood, tending to their property, meeting neighbors, and slowly preparing for the next challenge. The shed, the symbol of their independence and practical needs, remained a point of contention, but the homeowner no longer saw it as just a fight over a structure. It was a fight for dignity, respect, and the fundamental right to make decisions for themselves. In this quiet suburb, among tidy lawns and smiling neighbors, a quiet battle had begun, one that would test courage, resilience, and faith in justice. This was only the beginning, and the homeowner knew that the journey ahead would demand every ounce of patience, determination, and knowledge they could muster. But for now, they walked through their neighborhood with quiet pride, ready to face whatever came next, confident that the laws were on their side, and that standing up for what was right was always worth the effort. As the homeowners settled further into life in the neighborhood, the tension with the HOA began to grow. What started as small notes and warnings soon became a daily challenge. Every time they checked the mailbox, there was another letter, more formal and stern than the last. It seemed like the HOA was determined to make life uncomfortable for anyone who did not follow their strict rules. Each letter carried a new set of complaints, many of them petty, some even contradictory to rules that applied to other neighbors. The homeowner began to feel the weight of constant scrutiny. It was exhausting, but they refused to back down. The homeowner tried to maintain a normal life despite the mounting pressure. They would go out in the mornings to tend to the garden, water the plants, and enjoy the sunshine. But the fear of receiving a new complaint hung over them like a cloud. Sometimes they would pause mid-task, thinking about how the HOA would react to a flower bed or a bird feeder. They realized that even ordinary actions, things that brought joy, had to be carefully considered. It felt like walking through a minefield, where one wrong step could bring a fine or a stern warning. Yet, they refused to let fear control their life. They knew they were standing up for something important: the right to manage their own property without unnecessary interference. Neighbors began to notice the homeowner's struggle. Some approached quietly, offering sympathy but little practical advice. Fearing that speaking up might draw attention from the HOA, others were openly critical, calling them stubborn or reckless for challenging the association. The homeowner listened patiently, trying not to respond with anger. They understood that many people valued comfort over confrontation, and challenging the HOA meant creating waves in a community where most preferred calm waters. Still, the homeowner held firm, determined not to compromise on principle, even if it meant standing alone. The HOA's tactics became more aggressive. Phone calls started to arrive, some polite, others harsh, reminding the homeowner of the rules and threatening consequences. Meetings were scheduled to discuss the homeowner's known compliance, often attended by several board members who spoke with authority and judgment. The homeowner attended these meetings prepared, carrying notes, documents, and references to legal statutes. Each meeting was a delicate dance of words, where calm reasoning had to face off against intimidation and bureaucratic control. The homeowner spoke clearly and respectfully, refusing to be bullied, and gradually began to notice cracks in the HOA's arguments. One day, a particularly sharp letter arrived, stating that the homeowner's shed proposal would be rejected again and that additional penalties might follow if any construction began. This letter felt like a challenge. The homeowner read it carefully, underlining key phrases and noting any threats that seemed over the legal limit. It was clear that the HOA was attempting to use fear as a tool, hoping that repeated warnings would cause compliance. But the homeowner had prepared for this. They had researched property laws, HOA limits, and the rights of homeowners under local statutes. They knew they had legal ground to stand on. The knowledge gave them confidence. Despite the mounting tension, the homeowner continued to find small moments of peace. Early mornings and late evenings became times of reflection and planning. They walked around the property, imagining improvements, thinking through the next steps, and maintaining a sense of normalcy. Friends who visited offered support, bringing meals, helping with minor repairs, and offering encouragement. These acts of kindness reminded the homeowner that while the battle with the HOA was important, life still held beauty and connection. They leaned on these relationships, drawing strength from human connection in the midst of a stressful situation. At the same time, the homeowner's awareness of the HOA's inconsistencies grew. They noticed how some neighbors had structures or decorations that clearly violated the rules, yet the HOA ignored them. This inconsistency was both frustrating and enlightening. It demonstrated that the rules were not always about fairness, but about control. The homeowner began documenting these discrepancies, taking photos, noting dates, and preparing evidence that could support their position if the dispute escalated further. The process required careful observation, patience, and discipline. Every detail mattered, and the homeowner committed themselves fully to this. Preparation, the tension reached a peak when the HOA scheduled a formal hearing to address the shed and other minor infractions. The homeowner arrived early, documents in hand, feeling the nervous energy that comes with facing an organized and intimidating body. The meeting room was filled with HOA members and a few residents, all seated formally, papers neatly arranged. The homeowner took a deep breath and presented their case calmly. They spoke about the necessity of the shed, the safety benefits, and their compliance with local laws. The HOA members responded with interruptions and objections, but the homeowner remained composed, citing specific statutes and past precedents to support their position. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that the homeowner was not easily intimidated. Their calm and factual approach contrasted sharply with the aggressive tone of some HOA members. The homeowner noticed that a few board members began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Perhaps realizing that the legal arguments were sound, the homeowner's meticulous preparation paid off. And while the hearing did not end in immediate victory, it established a precedent for resistance and showed that the HOA could be challenged. Without confrontation turning into chaos, in the weeks following the hearing, the homeowner continued to receive letters, but their approach had changed. Instead of reacting with frustration or anger, they responded with professionalism, attaching evidence and citing regulations. This approach frustrated the HOA. Their usual tactics of intimidation were less effective against someone who understood their rights. The homeowner's patience, knowledge, and calm demeanor became their greatest tools. They realized that the struggle was not just about the shed, but about establishing respect for individual rights in a community where conformity was often demanded. The social dynamics of the neighborhood also shifted. Some neighbors quietly expressed admiration, recognizing the homeowner's courage. Others remained wary or critical, unwilling to take sides but still observing closely. The homeowner understood that change in perception would be slow. People often feared conflict, and taking a stand could isolate them. But the homeowner's integrity and consistency began to earn trust, even among those who initially doubted them. Small gestures of kindness, courteous communication, and visible respect for neighbors reinforced their position, showing that resistance to unfair rules did not require hostility or aggression. Amidst all the challenges, the homeowner also focused on personal growth. They read extensively about property law, conflict resolution, and negotiation techniques. They practiced patience, learning that reacting impulsively could worsen the situation. They developed a rhythm of life that balanced daily responsibilities with strategic thinking, ensuring that their household remained functional while navigating the escalating tension. Friends and family noted the change, impressed by the homeowner's resilience and dedication. As the months passed, the homeowner's confidence continued to build. They realized that standing up for what was right required more than just courage. It required knowledge, preparation, and composure. Each letter, meeting, and threat became an opportunity to reinforce their understanding of the law and their own ability to face challenges. The homeowner felt empowered by the realization that principles, when combined with practical knowledge, could withstand pressure from even a powerful organization like the HOA. The struggle also brought unexpected lessons about community and human nature. The homeowner observed how fear, conformity, and authority influence people's actions. They saw that standing up could inspire others quietly, even if they did not speak openly. They learned to navigate complex social dynamics, balancing assertiveness with diplomacy. These lessons strengthened not just their case against the HOA, but their overall approach to life, teaching them resilience, patience, and strategic thinking. Despite the pressure, life in the neighborhood continued. The homeowner maintained the garden, painted the house, cared for the property with the same attention and love as before. They refused to let the HOA control the joy of living in their own home. Even small victories, like keeping certain decorations or minor improvements, reinforced the sense of agency and self-respect. The homeowner knew that the real battle was long-term, but each step forward, each assertion of rights, was a meaningful accomplishment by the end of this period. The homeowner had transformed the struggle with the HOA into a disciplined practice of resistance and preparation. They had become meticulous in documentation, strategic in meetings, and resilient in the face of intimidation. The tension remained high, and challenges were still ahead, but the homeowner no longer faced them with fear or uncertainty. Instead, they approached each encounter with calm determination, a clear understanding of their rights, and the support of those who respected their courage. This was the stage of escalation, where the HOA's pressure intensified and the homeowner's resolve solidified. It was a test of character, patience, and intelligence. The homeowner had learned that rules could be challenged respectfully, that knowledge was a powerful shield, and that standing up for oneself was never easy, but always necessary. In the quiet moments, walking through the garden, or sipping coffee on the porch, the homeowner reflected on the journey so far, feeling a mixture of frustration, pride, and anticipation for what was to come. They knew the fight was far from over, but they were ready, armed with knowledge, patience, and an unshakable sense of justice. The tension that had been quietly building over months finally reached a breaking point. It started with small hints that something was wrong, little disturbances that did not make sense at first. One evening, the homeowner noticed a faint smell of smoke while sitting in the living room. At first, they thought it might be coming from a neighbor's barbecue or a passing vehicle. But the smell grew stronger, sharp, and acrid, making the air in the house hard to breathe. Alarm bells went off immediately. The homeowner jumped up, running to check every room, every corner, but could not find the source. Panic set in as they realized that the smoke was coming from outside. Rushing to the window, the homeowner saw flames in the backyard. The small shed they had been fighting for was engulfed in fire, and the flames were spreading toward the main house. Heart pounding, they grabbed the phone and called emergency services, explaining the situation as clearly as possible. Within minutes, the sound of sirens approached, breaking the quiet evening. The homeowner did not wait for anyone else. They started moving quickly, grabbing important documents, family photos, and essential items, trying to salvage what they could from the rapidly spreading fire. Neighbors gathered outside, some shouting, some frozen in shock. The homeowner could see fear and confusion on their faces, but most of them did not move to help. Some stayed behind barriers, calling 911 again, pointing or murmuring about the chaos. A few brave souls ran forward to help carry items from the porch. But the fire was aggressive and fast, fed by dry wood and strong winds. The homeowner felt a wave of helplessness, realizing that the life they had built was being threatened in ways they could not control. Firefighters arrived quickly, pulling hoses and working to contain the blaze. The homeowner watched, heart heavy, as smoke and fire consumed the shed and crept dangerously close to the house. They were grateful for the rapid response, but frustrated that the damage could not be fully prevented. The fire seemed almost alive, unpredictable, and merciless, turning a quiet neighborhood evening into chaos. The homeowner stayed close to the emergency responders, explaining the layout of the property and trying to direct them to prevent further loss as the fire burned. Questions raced through the homeowner's mind. How did it start? Could it have been an accident, or was it intentional? The timing, just weeks after the most recent confrontation with the HOA, could not be ignored. The homeowner had always taken safety seriously, using fire-resistant materials and keeping the yard clear of debris, yet here was destruction at their doorstep. The thought that someone might have acted deliberately made the skin crawl. Still, there was no proof, and they had to focus on survival and recovery first. Once the fire was controlled, the extent of the damage became clear. The shed was completely destroyed, the backyard scorched, and the edge of the main house slightly singed. The homeowner felt a mix of grief and relief. Grief for what was lost, the hard work, the possessions, and the sense of safety. Relief that the main house was mostly intact and that no one had been physically harmed. Still, the emotional impact was profound. Standing in the backyard, soot-covered and exhausted, the homeowner realized that their life would not be the same. Emergency responders worked tirelessly to ensure the fire was fully out. But the homeowner knew that rebuilding would be a long process. They started documenting everything immediately, taking photos, recording the damage, and writing detailed notes about the incident. Every piece of evidence could be important, especially if the fire was not an accident. They knew the value of preparation from their previous battles with the HOA, and understood that careful documentation could be the key to justice. Despite the chaos, they began to feel the familiar sense of determination rising within them. Insurance companies were contacted the next day. The homeowner explained the incident in detail, providing photos and documents. Adjusters visited the property, walking carefully around the damage, noting every burnt piece of wood, scorched garden, and singed siding. The process was slow and emotionally taxing. Every interaction reminded the homeowner of how quickly life could change, how fragile the sense of security in a home truly was. Yet, they remained composed, focused on presenting facts clearly and ensuring that every necessary step was taken. Neighbors' reactions were mixed. Some expressed sympathy, offering to help clean up or provide temporary support. Others were quiet, watching from a distance, unsure how to respond. The homeowner felt a range of emotions: gratitude for those who stepped forward, frustration at those who remained indifferent, and an acute awareness of the isolation that sometimes comes with standing firm against authority. The HOA predictably stayed silent in the immediate aftermath, neither offering support nor acknowledging the incident. This silence only added to the homeowner's suspicions and resolve as the days passed. The homeowner began rebuilding plans. The shed, once a source of contention, would be reconstructed, stronger and more secure. They reached out to contractors, discussed fire-resistant materials, and designed improvements that would both enhance the property and meet safety standards. While the emotional toll of the fire lingered, the homeowner's practical mindset took over, channeling grief into constructive action. The process of planning and rebuilding became a source of empowerment, a reminder that adversity could be met with resilience. The incident also brought new awareness about community dynamics and the power of institutions. The homeowner realized that standing up to the HOA was no longer just about personal property. It was about asserting the right to live without fear of intimidation or arbitrary enforcement. The fire, whether accidental or intentional, was a stark reminder that sometimes standing firm comes with real-world consequences. But the homeowner's sense of justice and understanding of the law gave them courage. They knew that reacting rashly could worsen the situation, and that careful, measured steps were essential. Friends and family rallied around the homeowner. They offered practical help, emotional support, and reassurance. Conversations ranged from strategic planning to simply being present, providing comfort and grounding during a time of upheaval. The homeowner found strength in these relationships, recognizing that human connection could be a stabilizing force even when external pressures threatened to overwhelm. They learned that resilience is not just personal, it is also supported by those who care and offer guidance, encouragement, and assistance. Meanwhile, the homeowner continued documenting everything with greater intensity: the fire, letters from the HOA, inconsistencies in rule enforcement, and interactions with neighbors all became part of a comprehensive record. Every detail mattered, from the date and time of incidents to photographs and witness statements. The homeowner understood that thorough documentation was not just about protecting themselves legally. It was a way to maintain control in a situation where so much had been lost and disrupted. It gave a sense of agency when many other aspects of life felt out of control. As the immediate crisis faded, the homeowner reflected on lessons learned. They realized that life in a controlled environment, like a neighborhood with an overbearing HOA, could be unpredictable and even dangerous when rules were enforced without fairness or humanity. They also recognized the importance of preparation, legal knowledge, and strategic thinking. Standing up to injustice required not just courage, but careful planning, awareness, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. The fire, though devastating, became a catalyst for growth and a deeper understanding of resilience. During cleanup and rebuilding, the homeowner's determination inspired others quietly. Neighbors who had been indifferent began to offer practical support, lending tools, helping with debris, and sharing advice. The homeowner noticed subtle changes in how the community interacted with them. While some remained wary, there was a growing recognition that the homeowner's perseverance was admirable, and that standing up for one's rights could be done respectfully and effectively. It was a small but meaningful shift, a reminder that courage could influence others even without words. Evenings became times for reflection. The homeowner would sit on the porch, looking at the charred remains of the shed and the scorched grass, thinking about the journey so far. Fear and anger existed alongside hope and determination. They understood that the incident was more than a loss, it was a turning point. The fire tested their resolve, revealed vulnerabilities, and demanded action. It also clarified priorities, highlighting the importance of knowledge, patience, and community support in the face of adversity. Through the smoke and destruction, the homeowner found clarity. They saw that the struggle with the HOA was far from over, but that their ability to face challenges had grown. Each interaction, each letter, and each confrontation had prepared them for this moment. The fire, though frightening, became a symbol of the stakes involved and the necessity of standing firm. The homeowner felt a renewed sense of purpose. It's understanding that resilience is not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. The rebuilding process also brought practical lessons. The homeowner learned more about fire safety, construction materials, and security measures to protect their property. They consulted experts, compared options, and made plans that were both practical and compliant with local laws. The experience reinforced the idea that preparation, knowledge, and careful planning are essential in maintaining control over one's life and property. Every decision became a deliberate act of empowerment, turning tragedy into an opportunity for growth. As weeks turned into months, the homeowner slowly restored the property. The shed was rebuilt stronger, the garden replanted, and the backyard revitalized. Each step forward was a testament to resilience and determination. The fire remained a memory, a reminder of vulnerability, but also of strength and capability. The homeowner had learned to face unexpected disasters after the fire. The homeowner knew that the battle with the HOA could no longer be just a personal struggle. It had to become a legal one. The destruction of the shed, the intimidation, and the constant harassment had crossed a line. It was time to bring knowledge, preparation, and documentation into the forefront. The homeowner started by organizing every letter, email, and record of communication. They made notes of each phone call, each conversation, and each instance where the HOA had acted beyond its authority. Every small detail mattered. This process took weeks, requiring patience and discipline, but it was crucial. The homeowner contacted a lawyer experienced in property rights and HOA disputes. During the first meeting, they laid out the full story, from moving into the neighborhood to the recent fire. The lawyer listened carefully, asking questions about every incident and reviewing the evidence meticulously. The homeowner explained the inconsistencies in rule enforcement, the unjust fines, the intimidation tactics, and the recent destruction of property. They were careful to remain factual, avoiding emotional exaggeration, knowing that in court, clarity and accuracy mattered more than anger or frustration. With legal counsel in place, the homeowner began preparing for the next steps. Notices were sent to the HOA, pointing out violations of state and local laws, challenging fines that had been imposed unfairly, and requesting accountability for actions that had endangered property and safety. Every letter was crafted to be polite, professional, and backed by legal references. The homeowner knew that a calm, methodical approach was more powerful than angry outbursts. The HOA responded with their usual rigid letters, dismissing some points, threatening further fines, and attempting to assert authority. But this time the homeowner did not back down. Each letter was met with a carefully worded response, citing laws, past precedents, and documentation of the HOA's inconsistencies. The homeowner began to feel a sense of empowerment. The knowledge that they were not only right but prepared made each interaction less stressful and more controlled. It was a new kind of confidence, one built on research, facts, careful planning. The community started paying closer attention. Some neighbors who had previously ignored the homeowner's struggles now began asking questions. They were curious, some quietly supportive, others still wary of involvement. The homeowner realized that their fight was becoming a symbol of resistance against unfair practices, though they remained careful to avoid appearing confrontational. Each conversation with neighbors was measured, thoughtful, and aimed at explaining principles rather than stirring conflict. Court proceedings began. The homeowner's lawyer filed a case against the HOA, citing harassment, intimidation, and illegal practices. The homeowner attended hearings, bringing every document meticulously organized, prepared to answer questions and present evidence clearly. The courtroom was tense, the HOA representatives asserting their authority and the homeowner calmly responding with facts. Each piece of evidence, the letters, fines, photographs, and witness statements was carefully presented, showing a pattern of abuse and highlighting the homeowner's consistent efforts to comply with lawful standards. Witnesses were called. Some neighbors who had been hesitant to speak initially came forward, quietly describing instances where the HOA had unfairly enforced rules or targeted residents. Their testimony was measured and factual, supporting the homeowner's case without personal bias. The homeowner felt a quiet sense of relief and solidarity, realizing that standing up could inspire others to speak the truth, even in small ways. Throughout the legal process, the homeowner maintained their property. Repairs continued on the shed and backyard, making improvements that were compliant with laws and safety codes. This was both practical and symbolic, a demonstration that standing up for rights did not mean neglecting responsibility. The homeowner wanted the court to see them as a diligent, law-abiding citizen rather than someone causing trouble. Each day they balanced preparation for court with tangible action at home, showing that resilience and responsibility could coexist. Meetings with the lawyer became a regular routine. They discussed strategies, reviewed responses from the HOA, and anticipated potential objections. The homeowner learned about legal procedures, court etiquette, and ways to present facts convincingly. This education was empowering. It reinforced the idea that knowledge is a shield against intimidation, and that careful preparation can turn fear into strength. The homeowner's confidence grew with every strategy session and courtroom appearance. The HOA tried various tactics to undermine the homeowner. They questioned the validity of evidence, tried to dismiss witnesses, and used procedural delays to create frustration. But the homeowner remained patient. They knew that legal battles were often slow, and that endurance and consistency were more powerful than reacting emotionally. Each attempt by the HOA to intimidate or delay only reinforced the homeowners' determination to see justice served. Community perception began to shift more noticeably. Neighbors who had once been silent started expressing quiet support, some volunteering information or assistance. It became clear that the homeowner's struggle was resonating with others who had felt powerless. The homeowner realized that standing up for oneself could have ripple effects, encouraging others to understand their rights and not accept unfair treatment silently. As the hearings progressed, the homeowner noticed small victories. Certain fines were overturned, procedural errors by the HOA were highlighted, and inconsistencies in enforcement were exposed. Each victory was carefully documented and celebrated privately, reinforcing the idea that persistence and careful preparation could yield tangible results. The homeowner began to feel that the tide was slowly turning. The emotional strain of the legal battle was immense, but the homeowner had learned to manage it. Early mornings and late evenings became times for reflection and planning. Walking around the property, reviewing documents, and preparing arguments became a rhythm, a way to channel stress into productive energy. Friends and family continued to provide support, offering perspective, encouragement, and practical help. Their presence reminded the homeowner that resilience was not just an individual trait, but a collective effort supported by community and relationships. The courtroom battles revealed something important: that knowledge and preparation could level the playing field against a seemingly powerful organization. Each hearing reinforced the homeowner's belief that fairness and law could triumph over intimidation. They realized that legal rights are only effective when backed by documentation, strategy, and clear, respectful communication. After months of hearings, letters, and negotiations, the court began to rule in favor of the homeowner in several key areas. Some fines were reversed, accountability for harassment was acknowledged, and the HOA's limits of power were clarified. The homeowner felt a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. The legal victories were not just about the shed or minor rules, they were about affirming the right to live without fear, intimidation, or arbitrary control. The experience transformed the homeowner. They had learned patience, strategy, and the importance of standing firm on principles. The fire, the letters, and the harassment had tested them. But through careful preparation, support from allies, and unwavering focus, they emerged stronger. The homeowner understood that resilience is built through action, knowledge, and the courage to face challenges directly. As the legal battle continued to finalize, the homeowner began rebuilding more than just their property. They were rebuilding confidence, self-respect, and a sense of empowerment. The HOA, once intimidating, was now facing consequences for overreach. And the homeowner's meticulous approach ensured that justice was based on facts, law, and fairness. The homeowner had turned adversity into an opportunity for growth and education, proving that knowledge and patience can overcome even the most persistent obstacles. By the end of this phase, the homeowner had achieved a balance between personal recovery and legal triumph. Their property was being restored, the fire was behind them, and the HOA was being held accountable for actions that had crossed legal boundaries. It was a chapter defined by courage, preparation, and the power of knowledge. The homeowner's journey through this legal struggle would serve as a foundation for the final stage, where rebuilding fully, celebrating victories, and solidifying long-term independence would take center stage. It was a story of resilience, empowerment, and the triumph of careful planning over fear and intimidation, with the legal battles behind them. The homeowner faced the task of rebuilding their life and property. The fire had left visible scars on the land, but it had also created an invisible resilience. The backyard, once scorched and charred, was now a canvas for careful planning and thoughtful improvement. Each day, the homeowner would walk through the property, envisioning how it could be restored and enhanced. They worked slowly and deliberately, understanding that patience and attention to detail were essential not only for physical reconstruction, but for emotional recovery. The shed, which had been the source of so much conflict, was rebuilt first. This time, the homeowner used fire-resistant materials and reinforced structures, ensuring safety and durability. Each plank placed and every nail driven was a small victory, a tangible symbol of overcoming adversity. Friends and family came to help, bringing tools, labor, and encouragement. Conversations were filled with laughter, planning, and shared stories of struggle, which transformed the rebuilding process from a chore into a communal effort that strengthened bonds and renewed hope. The garden, once scorched, was replanted with care. The homeowner chose plants that could withstand the elements, combining beauty with practicality. Paths were laid, flowers arranged, and trees pruned. It became more than just a garden. It was a sanctuary, a place where they could breathe, reflect, and enjoy the peace that had seemed elusive before. The effort put into restoring the backyard mirrored the inner restoration of confidence and determination. Each bloom that emerged from the soil symbolized a small triumph over adversity. The neighborhood began to notice the homeowner's resilience. Neighbors who had remained skeptical or indifferent started offering support and acknowledgement. Some helped with construction, others offered advice on landscaping or home improvement. Even those who had once whispered criticisms now spoke quietly of respect. The homeowner realized that courage and consistency in standing up for oneself could shift perceptions. Actions, not words, had the power to influence community opinion. This quiet recognition was deeply satisfying, reinforcing the idea that integrity and persistence mattered. With the property slowly restored, the homeowner turned attention to maintaining harmony within the community while asserting independence. They continued to attend HOA meetings, but now with a sense of calm confidence. They spoke clearly and respectfully, knowing their rights and prepared to back statements with facts. The homeowner's approach became a model for measured resistance, firm, lawful, and effective. By demonstrating that one could stand up for themselves without hostility, they inspired subtle change in community dynamics. Showing that fair and respectful advocacy was possible, the legal victories achieved earlier continued to have a positive impact. Fines were reversed, harassment claims were acknowledged, and the HOA's power was clarified. These outcomes did more than restore a sense of justice. They created a precedent, reinforcing the homeowner's understanding that rules must be applied fairly and that individuals have recourse against overreach. The homeowner's meticulous documentation and preparation had paid off, proving that knowledge and perseverance could triumph over intimidation. They felt empowered, knowing that they had faced a formidable challenge and emerged stronger and wiser.